Hello and welcome to Maryland Firearms and Tactical Training. My name is Ramsey Stimson. I'm the lead instructor here. Today in our second episode, we're going to be discussing the use of deadly force. And we're going to answer a number of questions about what you should do immediately following an incident. Now, let's ask a couple of questions first. When is it appropriate to use deadly force? Do you have a duty to retreat? And what do you do immediately after an incident? All good questions. Now let's talk about the use of deadly force and its definitions. Deadly force is defined as that level of force which is intended to cause death or grave injury or create some specified degree of risk that a reasonable or prudent person would consider likely to cause death or grave injury. That is deadly force. A person may use deadly force only as a last resort. The person must reasonably believe that they or he or she or a third party was in immediate danger of serious bodily injury or harm, and that there was no other reasonable means of defense or ability to escape. So, when can you use deadly force? When your assailant has the ability to cause you great bodily harm or death, and when your assailant has a gun, a knife, a club, or a physical advantage over you, and when your assailant has the opportunity to immediately employ their advantage or weapons against you, and when your assailant manifests an intent of doing you bodily harm or killing you through words or actions. When those things come together, you can use deadly force to defend yourself. So now let's talk about your duty to retreat. You may not use deadly force if you can safely retreat. However, retreat is not an option in a conflict if the defendant is in their own home. You do not have to leave your own home and seek refuge elsewhere. You have the right to defend yourself in your home. Someone enters your home and with intent to do you bodily harm, you have the right to defend yourself. If you're being robbed, someone presents the means by which to do you harm and they are trying to rob you, you do not have a duty to cooperate. You have the right to defend yourself. If you don't know how to escape, or if it's unsafe to retreat, you have the right to defend yourself. If you're out on a boat and someone assaults you and you need to defend yourself because jumping off the boat is not an option. The water has no conscience. It doesn't care whether you live or die, and you could be left there for exactly that. You do not have the duty to retreat. If you can't get away safely, if you don't know how to retreat, you have the right to defend yourself, but you must be able to establish that fact later. If you initiate aggression towards an individual or individuals, you may not be able to use deadly force in the resulting confrontation. You'll need to be able to demonstrate an attempt to de-escalate the situation or the conflict and to remove yourself from the situation or retreat and demonstrate that you were not a threat to a significant degree at that point. There was an incident that I recall in the 80s in North Carolina where an individual was in a bar and this individual started a fight. But at some point he realized that he didn't want to be in that fight anymore and he fled the bar. He ran away. He ran to his home. He locked the door and he hid in his home. But the individual that he had started a fight with chased him to his home and then kicked in his door. And it was at that point that the individual who had originally started the fight fired a gun, killing the guy that just kicked in his door. The judge ruled that a man need not retreat any further than their own home. So, if you can demonstrate that you are no longer a threat, you may be able to use deadly force, but this is a touchy situation you need to be aware of. If you can de-escalate, if you can put distance between yourself and the situation, and you can stop the fight, then there's no need to use deadly force. So be aware of this when contemplating using deadly force. Now, when you're involved in an incident, let's talk about that. When you're involved in an incident where you must draw your handgun or use it, and those are two different things, do not leave the scene if it is safe to stay. Only leave the scene if it's unsafe to stay. Just because you didn't use your handgun doesn't mean you don't need to report it, because there's likely to be someone else to report an incident where someone pulled a firearm. So, if you're involved in an incident and it's unsafe to stay, leave the place, but immediately get to a safe place and call the police and report the incident. Call the police as soon as possible. That's what it comes down to. Now, there's going to be some people that are going to instruct you to not call the police. They're going to tell you, don't you call the police, because anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. This is true, that anything you say or do can and will be used against you in a court of law. So it's important that you know exactly what to say. If you in fact allow someone else to call, they could say things that make it look very different than what you need to convey. So I'm not going to advise you to allow anyone else to call if you're capable of keeping focused and limiting what you say. Now, you need to establish a number of things. You need to tell the police that there's been an incident or a shooting and that you were the victim. Be able to describe yourself as the victim. Let them know what you look like, what you're wearing, and where you are. And let them know that you need assistance because you were the victim. It's very important that you establish that you were the victim. We're going to say this over and over again. I want you to understand you were the victim. It's important that you're able to establish not only that you were the intended victim, but who the assailant was. That you, in fact, were not the assailant. Because that assailant could be laying on the ground bleeding, could be dead, could have run away and called the police themselves. Others that saw the incident may not see it your way. So establish that you were the intended victim and not the assailant. You want to be able to point out a number of things. Now, witnesses are not going to be able to confirm necessarily that you were the intended victim, and police may not have any way of knowing. When they respond to the scene, they're going to know there was an incident, and they're going to be wary of that situation, their own safety, the safety of everyone there. They're going to want to shut everything down. They're going to want to take complete and total control of the situation. So be aware of that. There's going to be a point where you're going to need to respectfully decline to answer any questions, any further questions, and to request an attorney and legal counsel. You want to establish several things when police arrive, though. You want to establish what happened. I was attacked by the assailant. They pointed a gun at me, or a knife, or struck me, or used a club, or a bottle, or whatever it is that they did in order for you to respond the way you did. And you need to be able to say, I was forced to defend myself. Confirm, again, that you, in fact, were the victim. State that you'll sign a complaint, that you'll file a report, that you will testify against the assailant. This is not something that assailants will say. Again, I was the victim. I will testify against them. I will file a complaint. I will file a report. But you're not going to do all of that right then and there at the scene. There's going to be plenty of time for that later. Indicate that you will cooperate with the investigation after you have spoken with your counsel. Do not sign anything or give a full statement at the scene. Do not do that. Now, point out any evidence. Take the opportunity to point out the weapon, to point out shell casings, to point out a knife. Whatever you can point out that's going to help them determine exactly what happened and in fact that you were the victim. Evidence can easily be inadvertently lost, blow away, roll away, stepped on, picked up by a witness who wants a souvenir or someone who wants that weapon. Make sure that that evidence is noticed by the police. You don't have to explain it other than there it is, so that they see it and it doesn't escape the fact that it exists. Point out the witnesses. Not everyone's going to want to get involved. Some people won't want to answer questions, but you need to point out people who witnessed the incident. You can't tell them what the witness is going to say because the witness may say something entirely different. You can't decide what the witness can or can't say. Let the police talk to the witnesses. Now, at this point, you want to request an attorney. Ask for legal counsel. It's your right. They can't deny that of you. The police are going to want to ask questions. So again, you've pointed out the fact that you were the victim, that this was the assailant. There's the evidence. Here's the witnesses. I will testify. I will sign a complaint. I will make a report. And then you shut it down. You tell them, I would like to speak to my attorney before answering any further questions. It's not likely that you'll recall everything in the correct order and exactly as it happened in the moment. Police don't necessarily ask questions in the order that things have happened, but they write things down in the order that they ask their questions. So they could establish what looks like the occurrence of events and the order of that occurrence when in fact that is not what happened. So give them only the information that they absolutely need. Now, if the EMTs or the medical professional personnel show up, ambulance personnel, you want to ask to be evaluated for injuries. Tell them, I want to be checked out. I'm not sure I'm okay. You want to express that you're concerned about your own well-being. It becomes important in establishing frame of mind at that time as well. Now, some people ask, well, why not answer questions immediately? The order of the events is important, and making statements that are not accurate could make it look like you're lying. You don't want to do that. Distances are difficult to estimate, and it's highly unlikely you're going to recall the exact number of rounds that you fired, how many times exactly they lunged at you, or their height, weight, color of their clothing in exacting detail in the moment. So reserve that for later if possible. If the assailant escaped the scene, you want them to know that they're looking for someone of a particular skin color and a particular height, estimated of course, and what you believe the clothing was that they were wearing. But establish the fact that you're not 100% certain of the exact details, unless in fact you are. Chances are you won't be. You may even be convinced that you are. My advice is request the assistance of legal counsel at that point. You have to remember that when they're asking the questions, that they're writing things down, and that becomes a matter of record. Don't want to give them a false statement or something that will appear to be false later, because your statements will be used against you later. So let's recap. Recapping your response to the incidents is pretty straightforward, but it's something you need to practice. You need to talk yourself through it. Establish what happened. Do not attempt to provide details. Establish that you were the intended victim and indicate that you will cooperate with the investigation. Point out the evidence before it's lost. Point out the witnesses before they disappear. Respectfully decline to answer any additional questions and request an attorney. If the emergency medical personnel or ambulance personnel respond, request to be medically evaluated so that you know that you're okay and you can show that you are in fact concerned about yourself. It's very important that you practice these things. They don't come naturally, and it's easy to get lost in a barrage of questions. So take a moment, take a breath, think about it, and do those things. Don't just start answering questions randomly. It won't help you later on. Again, thank you for joining us today. If you have any suggestions for a topic in the future or any additional questions, please feel free to email me at rlstimson@mfat.com. And please like and subscribe to our channel. That way you get the latest information and updates as they occur. And as I always say, train to live. It is a worthwhile endeavor. Thanks again.